What's up, everybody? I'm James. Welcome to Mechanical Mayhem, and thanks so much for having the courage and taking the chance for clicking on this particular video. This video is titled a podcast, and in parentheses, Ramblecast for how I operate, and hopefully that'll help people understand what they clicked on in terms of what's about to happen. But the length is long, and that's always going to be scary for people to click on at times. It's always kind of going to be a dangerous thing to kind of put up on a channel, right? Because A, I'm a very, 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 very small channel still, and I don't expect that to really ever change. And B, the longer something is, the more hesitant you can be to click on it. So just want to say again, thank you for just clicking on it. And if you'll indulge me for at least a few more minutes, you can decide if you want to be a part of this video in terms of letting it run and listening to it. So with that said, this is a podcast, or as I call them, Ramblecast for myself, setup. It's just me, but what I mean by that is you don't need to watch it. You can just let it run and listen to it in the background. So you can play a video game, cook food, do some chores, do some hobby stuff, whether you're making a Magic the Gathering deck or you are painting up miniatures or something, or whatever the case might be, right? You can have this run in the background while doing your activities. And I encourage it because it's not going to be any footage, just one picture, just to fill space. And you can just listen to it in the background. And with that said, this is going to be something that I'm sure isn't everybody's cup of tea. I don't even drink tea, but you get my point. So I understand completely if you go, nah, I'm good. I'll check out one of your older videos, or I'll go and wait for something new to come out. I understand. I hope to see you come back. But if this seems intriguing to you, I hope you'll stick around and you'll indulge this nerd here that is me. Because I want to nerd out a bit. I want to nerd out on the Battletech setting, and I want to do it in a non-conventional way. So, with that said, this podcast is going to be taking an anthropological look, if you will, or using somewhat of an anthropological lens to look at the Battletech setting insofar as the creation of the clans themselves. The clans are my favorite aspect of the Battletech setting in terms of a faction type. But even if they never existed, I'd be a big fan of this setting and would still find stuff really intriguing and always come back to it. But they are that much extra coolness to me, and the fact that they exist the way they exist, I think is a job well done by the designers of the time. So I want to take a bit of an anthropological lens and put it over this setting so we can kind of break things down a little bit. So firstly, what is anthropology? That's an important question. And I'm not trying to sit here as some expert. I didn't get my degree, my bachelor's in anthropology. I had a focus on archaeology, which is not paleontology, just so we're clear. You'd be surprised how many people confuse that for some reason. They're not even close to the same word. But anyways, I guess because both dig. But the point is this. I'm not trying to say that I am the de facto expert in anthropology. I don't use it. Right? I have my degree in it. In fact, this is one of the few times I get to use it and have fun with it. Unfortunately, I don't get to use it as a career. But in any case, with that said, I am not some outsider either. So I can give you my basic gist breakdown of what anthropology is, because there's a lot of fields in anthropology. As I mentioned, there's archaeology, which is old culture or dead culture at times. Basically, you have to dig it up. It's not something, you're not looking at a living organic thing. You're looking at what has passed. There's physical anthropology, which is more or less primates and human evolution. You could say it's kind of like what got us to be humans, and looking at primates like chimps and orangutans and stuff like that, and of course gorillas and whatever else, and seeing connections and similarities, and hopefully maybe you're trying to find a missing link that, to link Homo sapien and everything else together, like Homo heidelbergensis and everything else. And also you could argue this could be a big focus on studying Neanderthals. But anyways, the point is, physical anthropology is that. Primates, human evolution. The rest is some form of anthropology, the word, which is cultural, medical, social, linguistic, culinary. There's a whole lot, right? The way I like to look at it, all of this together is the study of what makes humans human. That's how I look at anthropology. Is it the best definition? No. Are there diehards out there that might comment to this if they found this and go, "You're incorrect, how dare you?" Probably. Do I care? No. Because it's not wrong. In any case, with that said, the next question is, well, this is a fictional setting, the Battletech universe. How are you going to do this? And you're absolutely right. The standard ways of doing an anthropological study will not work here. We can't live amongst the culture, and we can't do the day-to-day and talk with people who are living and get a sense of what's going on like you could do in like a peasant village, or on a or in some culture with like certain tribes or anything else. We can't do that because it's a fictional setting. But we can still take that lens of concept of thinking and look at what makes, in this case, the factional archetype of the clans tick. Like, what was their creation like in the setting of the lore of things, and why it doesn't make sense, or doesn't make sense. And I say yes, and why does it make sense? That's kind of what we're doing with this anthropological lens. So hopefully that helps you get a sense of what we're doing here. Now, a little bit of context, I guess, for the sake of the setting. It came out in 1984, Battletech. The clans were not a part of it in the beginning. The clans themselves, I believe, debuted in 1990. That's the earliest I could find, like, dated artwork when they were published, 1990. So could it be more accurate to say technically probably been worked on in 1989 or so, or first maybe came out in the very end of 1989? Maybe. We're just going to stick with 1990. Now, I myself was born in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s, and I went to college in the early 2000s. So I did more or less grow up with Battletech / MechWarrior. And while I've been a fan of it for as long as I can remember, and basically just soaked in all of these different aspects: the card game, the TV show, the toys from the TV show, the comic from the TV show, the miniature games, the MechWarrior stuff, all that jazz, Mech Commander, etc. What's really interesting to me is that I knew two people who had a vague interest in the setting, enjoyed playing MechWarrior, and the other one enjoyed MechWarrior and Mech Commander stuff. But in the same vein that they enjoyed doing other games like StarCraft and Command & Conquer and Duke Nukem and all that jazz, right? Like, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was elevated necessarily in any other way, like you might have a particular fandom that's elevated for you, right? So I really never got to do things past the solo stuff. I would have liked to have learned the Battletech Manager game back closer to its apex than now. I still would like to learn it. I just don't know anybody who's really interested in this setting the way I am, or at least in a similar vein. It doesn't have to be the same way I am, because I am weird. But you get my point. My point in all this is to say, I didn't come across this setting yesterday. And when I went into college and I started learning about anthropology, my major and everything, in greater detail, I found myself looking at settings I enjoyed: StarCraft, Warhammer 40,000, the Battletech setting a lot, and so on, Star Wars and all that jazz. With the whole anthropological lens a little bit, because things started to click for me, or questions started to be raised, and I started to take more interest in learning stuff. Not just of real life culture, real things that existed, but of fictional. So here we are. Today, or whenever you're watching this, or listening to it, I should say. So, we're going to look specifically at the clans, like I said, and where they came from. And where they came from is the original Star League Defense Force. It would be dissolved after the American Civil War because the great houses could not settle upon and decide and agree upon a new first lord of it, more or less. Uh, so they dissolved it. And there's more to it. There's some other politicking, whatever else. But basically, this was not good, right? Alexander Kerensky tried to keep the Star League afloat, but saw the writing on the wall and saw the storm on the horizon. And so the bulk of the remaining Star League forces went with him voluntarily into Operation Exodus. They went into exile. They took all the technology they could take with them. They took a whole bunch of supplies with them. Everything else was put into lockdown. And they bounced. And a few years after that, the first of these succession wars would start. The prophesized, intersphere spanning conflict that Alexander Kerensky basically spoke of happened. And the rest is intersphere history, more or less, right, for this setting. So this leaves us with a very interesting group of humans in exile. Because this isn't really a actual more comprehensive population group, but it is a very diverse group. The thing is, they're all either military or you could look at it as civilian contractors for the military together, right? It's all part of the Star League, whether you are considered an actual military member of the Army or some other, or the Navy or whatever else, or you are a scientist or a researcher that's part of the Star League to advance things for the Star League. You are still of the Star League, and their families, of course. They also brought with them animals, not just livestock stuff that would make sense, but like bears and birds and jaguars and wolves. But in any case, this is what would go into exile. Now, this is a really interesting case concept study to me, a thought experiment study to me, because we have a case of like modern humans going off completely off grid. I mean, so far off grid that it's impossible to be that off grid in real life. Like, they're going beyond any known star maps and star charts that they have for the surrounding areas of the inner sphere into the great unknown of the void of space. You can't get any more secluded and away from anybody than off the trail completely like that. Which means, should they survive, which they do, you have a bit of a vacuum in which humanity can culturally evolve on its own terms based on the situation at hand without any outside influence and completely potentially different from where they came from. And that's really neat and interesting. And that's exactly what happened for the clans, out of necessity for a lot of it. Which is why when they returned, centuries later, they were thought to be aliens at first. And there's a pretty neat quote from when they did return that says, they were brothers and sisters to our own ancestors, but centuries ago. So the original, the Star League in exile, more or less, was brothers and sisters to the ancestors of the inner sphere in the year 3050, right? Or 3050-ish. So what he's basically saying is these clans' ancestors were no different from our own brothers and sisters of the past. However, they have been tempered by a stronger flame and are hardened to the point of, beyond what they have in their own nightmares for what a person can be hardened to do or be like. And that they're still our brothers and sisters now, but they are so hardened and tempered by a stronger flame so differently that they are utterly alien to us. So they're humans, but they're still alien to us. That's an interesting and somewhat unnerving thing when you think about it. Like, you're looking at this person from the clans, and that's a human. Looks no different than your siblings or your family. But their beliefs, the way they're able to act, the things that they can do because of their training, not just because you might be looking at a true-born warrior, but just their viewpoint, their ethics and whatnot are so different that all you're looking at is the silhouette of a person, but they might as well be an alien. It's kind of crazy. Now, what's really interesting about this, and when I started learning more about anthropology and different ways anthropological study happens in real life, and some examples of real world tribes and stuff being studied and whatever else, it really got me thinking, as a nerd does, about one of their favorite settings. And because in real life we have something not the same, we have something we can relate to with it, or relate to this. And those are the isolated tribes that I mentioned. Now, I don't have any by name to bring up because I don't do proper prep work. Come on now. But there was one in particular that exists on an island. And this island was not an island we knew existed for a long time. But on this island was a group of people, or is still, hopefully. Last I checked, which wasn't too recently, they were still there. But there's this group of people, this tribe, I guess you could call them, that live on this island in total seclusion. Now, I don't know how long they've been there, but I would presume a good amount of time. And when we discovered them, it was quite a shock because we didn't know there was anything habitable over here, and here's this island with people on it. How did they get here? Good questions, but not for this video or this podcast. So now we, as modernized people, had a conundrum and ultimately chose to leave them in isolation. Now this, you could say, to a certain degree, is up for debate whether or not that's the right call. I think it's fine because, well, they don't need us. Clearly they haven't needed us for as long as they've been there. So it's not like we are letting them live life barely holding on necessarily. That's, as far as we can tell, they've been here for a good amount of time. But outside of that, biologically, they're isolated from all the pathogens that we're used to. So if we did try to lend aid or make contact properly and establish something there to learn about them, we could probably accidentally wipe them out because their immune system would not have any idea what to do with what we take for granted as not even being a problem. This happened before to indigenous peoples, right? So we know it as a real threat. So that's another good reason why we kept them in isolation. But if you were able to eavesdrop and knew the language they were speaking, chances are whatever their culture is like would probably be pretty surprising, either for how similar it is to ours, or, like we have in this fictional setting with the clans, how different it is. Because this was able to basically go on in a vacuum. Now, it's unclear what this tribe will do, or what it might be like a century from now, if they would even still be there, or where they would progress to, because they are limited by their resources. We're not going to see them suddenly start to smelt precious metals, because I don't think that geographical area really has much to offer them outside of stones, right? And unfortunately, just as a quick random side note on this tangent, because what I do, we have debris from our societies that have made it to their shore from either a nearby ship that has sunk, or if something happened, they have some metal tools now that they fashioned from the wreckage that made it to their shore that they found. We know this because there isn't this level of refined metal in the footage and photographs that they've taken of that area. They wouldn't be able to make this level of refined metal. So how much have we already interfered with this cultural's growth? I don't know. Clearly, they understand the capability of this metal, its strength, its durability. Is it a status symbol thing? Or is that person now a target to be killed by somebody jealous who wants it? Does it have a certain meaning in their culture now? Who knows? But if you could study it without being murdered, because they are very aggressive to anybody on the outside, because, well, they don't know the outside world, understandable, we get to see that their culture is either very similar or pretty different. And what that role of these metal pieces play would be anybody's guess. Now, what does that have to do with this fictional setting that is the Battletech universe? A little bit. The point is that the Star League in Exile would be able to, over the centuries, grow, right? And fairly early on became the clans, and the clans would themselves actually be able to grow culturally over those centuries. And this is important because they're doing so without any outside influence from the outside. They never forgot about the Uniosphere, and they have kept tabs ish kind of sort of over the years. But it's not a direct influence to them per se outside of their worry that they might be discovered and therefore keeping certain things up for defense or whatever else. But outside of that, they're able to pretty much evolve their cultural concept and identity the way they feel fit or the way they see fit and feel they need to for what's going on where they live. And the only difference between this and the real world examples of isolated tribes is that the technology difference is there. The technology of the clans is actually superior to the inner sphere, but the whole point is that technology is near peer. There just happen to be the higher up of the two peers. So does that make sense? Well, yes, it does. Of course it would make sense. In a sci-fi setting where you're taking ships into space, right? But the point is that that's the only difference between a real-world example of stuff, right? We haven't found a Wakanda. That would be the equivalent. If tomorrow we discovered some other island or underwater thing or something happened in a forest somewhere and the trees disappeared or in a jungle or something and there was this Wakanda-esque level of human society, that would be more on par. But in any case, outside of that being the difference technologically, there are some similarities here in that we have cultural growth and evolution happening without or with very minimal outside influence. How about that? So, with that being said, let's look at the clan's creation itself and see why I personally feel it works out very well and makes sense. And kudos to the designers. I don't know who was on the design team at the time in Phasa or with the Battletech design team or whatever when it came out in 1990 and when they were working on it, because if they were winging it, they did a fantastic job winging it. If they were purposely doing stuff like this because there was some form of sociology or anthropology background as a part of that team, fantastic job anyways, right? Still fantastic job regardless. So I don't know. I don't do my prep work, but I do think they did a good job here because as is part of the setting on a whole, it feels very believable for this to happen within this fictional universe, of course. So what do I mean by that? Well, the Battletech setting overall, when you look into it and really take a step back and just look at it in its entirety, everything about it, the history of it, how it draws upon real-world timeline stuff of humanity in real life, and kind of goes from there and takes it forward into the Battletech fictional side of things, it leads to the setting as a whole feeling very believable / livable. Obviously, it's a fictional setting, but it, to me, and I think for a lot of people who are fans of the setting, feels pretty believable of a thing that could happen. Obviously, liberties taken for it being a sci-fi fictional setting, but if you thought about it, or if you think about it, outside of the language barrier and being a productive member of society barrier, because we don't know anything about the technology that would exist then, if you woke up on some planet in the inner sphere tomorrow that wasn't a conflict zone, you'd probably be able to go about the daily grind stuff more or less the same as you do now. Obviously, language and stuff aside. But you'd be able to, I feel, in pretty short order, navigate the daily grind. Now, the thing about this is, the inner sphere is very diverse, but so is real world Earth, right? Real life people are very diverse. And I think this livability, this relatability and livableness of the inner sphere as the setting stems from the fact that, to me, the way I looked at it is that the inner sphere is just the Earth spread amongst the stars, right? They took how people are on Earth, and instead of it being different countries, different states or provinces or whatever, it's different planets. And those planets make up the great houses, which are like your big governments and whatnot. So yeah, the governing bodies are different. Royalty would be different, stuff like that. But in terms of your daily grind of going to work, going to school, getting groceries, going to a bar or a club or whatever else, recreation, it's all there. This is a very livable, believable setting in that regard, and it leads to it being pretty relatable. And one thing I think that is of note with that is this translates into all aspects of the setting, including the clans, right? It feels very believable the way they would go, given what we have for context. This is very different from a setting that I also thoroughly enjoy, Warhammer 40,000, right? The 40k setting for humanity is it's a very grimdark setting, period, and humanity is very grimdark. You would never want to live on a planet in 40k. But if you woke up on a planet in the Battletech universe, it wouldn't be that bad. Outside of a war zone, of course, probably wouldn't be that bad. So what makes this believable even for the creation of the clans? Because the clans are so radically different to be viewed as alien, but in human form. How can this be believable? Well, we have to think about what I referenced earlier. This is a military organization in its totality. We don't have a country in exile amongst the stars. And I mean literally the entire population. That includes criminals, that includes homeless, and the other less fortunate. That includes royalty, if there are any, super rich, celebrities, athletes. Everything about that country in space would be a very different outcome than what we have with the Star League forces. Because the Star League it's a self-contained force drawn from a multitude of different areas, a lot of diversity, but all for the same common goal as what they came together for. This is a military organization with civilian support, specifically for the military organization. So that together going into exile, and just that, makes what the clans are more believable to me, personally. So let me explain a little bit more. Nicholas Kerensky, who is Alexander Kerensky's oldest son and successor, more or less, will be the one to create the clans. Alexander Kerensky orchestrated Operation Exodus, or else Alexander Kerensky was trying to suppress the civil war that happened amongst the Pentagon worlds, when the first set of worlds they would actually kind of colonize, if you will. But he would die. Now, I bring this up because this also makes this feel so relatable and believable, right? As a setting. Alexander Kerensky is a sacred figure amongst the clans. The Star League and Alexander Kerensky are the closest things you're going to get to like a religious feel for the clans. It's sacred. And typically, I feel, a lot more of the time anyway, somebody that's a big important figure like that's going to go out swinging, right? They're going to go out in glorious combat, a crazy last stand, or a super convoluted, crazy assassination plot, right? Well, Alexander Kerensky dies from a massive heart attack in the setting. That's it. A massive heart attack. Probably from the stress. Don't get me wrong. Probably a lot of stress. But it's so mundane. It's so basic. It's so believable. So we don't have a change in belief structure because of this death. This is just a human going out like a human can go out. So anyways, I just wanted to cover that real quick because I actually like that. I feel like depending upon the setting you're looking at, and not every setting does it dissimilar from this. There are plenty of settings that are similar to this, but I feel like a lot of stuff, you go out swinging like some crazy awesome boss, right? Or it's some act of ultimate betrayal, or it causes, or it culminates in some massive explosion because of something awesome and epic. I think is what we're so used to seeing these days. That when you really think about this, it's very mundane and basic and kind of refreshing in comparison to more modern stuff. But anyways, Nicholas Kerensky would carry out the legacy and would be the one that ultimately orchestrates the clans. And if we look at what he's drawing from the fact that they are a military organization. They don't have anything else to kind of even draw from in terms of how they want to reorganize things. So that right there, I think, leads to some of the differences the clans have, why their structure is much more disciplined and strict and a bit more rigid. And I think also can be used to explain a little bit the caste-based mentality that would happen with the clans. I'm not saying there is no caste-based societal stuff in the Great Houses. I honestly don't know enough about all of them to tell you that. Definitely could be some caste-based structure on some planet somewhere. But I'm just saying it makes sense for the clans to adopt this because it's a military organization. I'm not saying militaries are caste-based. All I'm saying is when you think about how militaries operate, and I'm a civilian, I've never been in the military, so I don't know. So I could be a little bit off base here, and anybody who has military experience could let me know in the comments. But it's kind of, I feel like the military, outside of some specific examples of certain high-functioning, capable people, you're more or less locked into your role, right? I guess you could test out in certain capacities or test into certain some things, right? Like you don't just go into the military to become an Army Ranger. You have to qualify, is the best way I can put it. So there's that. But you're not suddenly going from the Navy on a ship to Army Ranger School or something like that, right? That's not a thing. You have your job, you have your station, and that's how you carry it out. Somebody's going to tell me in the comments, actually, there's one guy. Okay, there's exceptions to every rule if that is the case. But the point is this. There's not a pure rigid caste-based structure of the clans either. But my point is that your job, your MO, your whatever it is, that is, if you look at it as a societal thing, that could feel kind of caste-like. So I kind of see it. I can see the correlation. Plus, we also have to understand that Nicholas Kerensky also based the structure of the clans, the basics of the clans, on different groups throughout humans' history. So the history of humanity, from all the way back to the Mongols forward, and probably even back further than that, is the inspiration and things that were drawn upon for the restructuring of humanity of the Star League and Exile that were loyal to Nicholas Kerensky into the clans. And a big part of this, which is an absolutely absolutely, I think, a goal, is the elimination of cultural biases. Now, there's a massive asterisk there, and we'll come back to that asterisk, but the point is that he realized that eventually the exiles would succumb to the same failings that not only the Pentagon worlds that had the Civil War happen succumbed to, but also the inner sphere that they sought to leave and avoid the conflicts of. That if they did not change and adapt, they would fall to the same problems. And part of that is all the cultural biases, and I was born into this, or I have this level of affluence, or stuff like that, right? So instead, Nicholas Kerensky made a society, or made part of the basis of the clan society, that is all about merit and ability. That's what's awarded. It doesn't matter that you come from royalty. It doesn't matter that your dad was a celebrity, right? It doesn't matter that you can afford the most expensive thing. How good are you at your job? How able are you to do the thing you said that you were going to do? Results and aptitude are much more important and the defining characteristics of clan society, even for the civilian side of stuff. And that's really cool. And it's probably a bit rigid or harsh for certain people's tastes. But the idea is that it doesn't matter your gender, it doesn't matter your race, your creed, your preferences. None of that matters. What matters to Kerensky and his clans is, can you get the job done? If you say, I can take this over, or if you say, I can make this better, can you actually do that? If yes, prove it. If you do, great, you'll be rewarded. If you don't, there's punishment, and you failed, and now we have to readjust how well you are and what you get and whatever else if you survive. And there's different punishments, but the point is that the society is all about, look, I don't care that you're 17th generation X, Y, or Z. How good are you at your job? Can you do this? Yes or no? Do it, prove it, and then we can talk. I like that. It's pretty refreshing as a concept because, as you'll see amongst the clans, there's male and female leadership roles and positions and everything else that are going on, whole leaders and the like. There's a whole bunch of different visual cultural people involved in certain aspects as well. Doesn't matter, black, white, Asian, whatever it is, right? Some crazy futuristic amalgamation of cultures together to become its own cultural thing. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. To the clans, you're just a person. And the only thing that matters to them about you is what's your capabilities. Prove yourself. Have you proven yourself? Can you continue to prove yourself? That's what matters to them, which is pretty cool. Now, the asterisk is, of course, the fact that this is still a human society, and humans are going to have biases and prejudices and all that jazz, and we would see it be orchestrated and engineered in with the whole Trueborn situation. I did a video on Trueborn, so if you want to know more about what a Trueborn is in clan society, you can check out that video. But with that said, the point is that we do have some prejudices, some biases that pop up in clan culture. It's just going to happen once something evolves for centuries. You're going to have that. Right? It's impossible to not have that as far as we can understand it and be human. Right? It's natural to have a bias towards something. It's natural to prejudge something. Honestly. Sit back and get off any high horse and think about it. It's just going to happen. It's going to happen. But the importance of this is that clan culture is about, look, merit and ability. Do it. Can you do it? Great. So that's really refreshing. And that also makes sense when you consider what he's coming from, which is a Star League Defense Force group. A military organization where merit, ability, aptitude is definitely going to be important. Right? Can you lead? You have to be a good leader. We need good leaders. Can you fight? If you want to be a warrior, are you capable of being a warrior? Like, these things matter, right? In those kind of situations, or else you're not going to be part of a defense force. You're not going to be part of the army. You're not going to be a researcher or whatever. Like, so the idea that he would want this to be the way things are for the clans makes a lot of sense based on where he's coming from. And also, outside of that, or on top of that, they are completely alone out here. Except for the civil war that happened with the Pentagon Worlds, but even back when they were there, they're completely alone. They don't have time for such luxuries as a prejudice bias situation right now, right? We need to survive, we need to live, we need to grow, and we need to stop this civil war and have some measure of stability here, or we're going to go nowhere. So, on that level, it also makes sense. Now, to do this, they are going to flex their might, right? And part of that might is the technology. Now, granted, the Pentagon Worlds at the time and everything are near peer. So it's not like they're fighting off sticks and stones with robots or anything like that. But the point is that technology has always played an important role with the Star League. So these exiles into this clan situation, it makes a lot of sense for them to keep an eye on their technology and progress it. And that's exactly what they do. Where the Inner Sphere, during their barbaric succession wars, would actually face technological regression to a minor degree. Nothing crazy. It's still interstellar travel and advanced medical technology and all that jazz. But they do have a bit of a technological regression and a little bit of stagnation. The clans would not ever experience that. They would have a bit of a renaissance technologically because they need to rely on their technology, right? In order to make it where they went, the tech had to work. In order for the tech to work, they got to maintain it, and in maintaining it, they can make improvements. So it's very organic in terms of the thought process for why the clan's technology never suffered. Even amongst their civil war, it never suffered because they need this technology to work, or else there's no living. So with that, you want the people best suited to maintaining it, right? Like merit and ability. So it all kind of links together a little bit. Now, of all the technology that the clans would have, which is all technology, because they have the same, all facets of technology, I suppose, that the clans make progress in, is a better way to put that. The one they would make the most progress in is not what you might think for a game of armored combat with giant robots. And that's because it's the realm of biological and medical science and technology where they would make the biggest strides. But it also makes a lot of sense when you think about it. This is what you need to live, right? They don't have worlds to fall back on. They're trying to find their worlds. So they need to figure out how they can have food and supplies through all this. And if they're going to piggyback off planets that are somewhat habitable, how they can grow things. And once they do find the worlds they want to terraform and artificially engineer and whatever else for themselves, setting up shop and having livestock. And also, they brought wild animals with them, bears and wolves and jaguars and birds. And they will be genetically altered to survive in these harsher conditions. Harsher because it's completely different from where they're native to. They never were meant to be on this world, and here they are, and they're going to be engineered to survive. And this is where a lot of the totemic animals would come from for the clan's naming structure, such as smoke jaguar, ghost bear, snow raven, and so on. So, pretty interesting. But to do that, you gotta be pretty good on your biology game and your medical game, right? So also you can stay alive. And the clans are very good at that. In fact, there's a novel in which a mech warrior ejects from a blowing up, burning up mech. He's injured. One of his eyes are basically destroyed, and he's burnt, and he's passed out from the pain when he ejects. But he comes to in a medical facility. His skin grafts have all took, and his eye is back. It was basically regrown. So their level of medical technology and treatment, especially if they can get to you in time, is super, super high. On top of that, they also have a eugenics program where they can literally make people, right? They have the Trueborn warriors, specifically for the warrior caste, but the Trueborns are artificially gestated humans in an iron womb. And this technology isn't unique to the clans, but they will be the ones that take the technology and make it the iron womb, because this technology was originally a form of life support for premature babies, which is a completely awesome idea and noble cause, right? And I really like the level of detail they went with this as being the basics for what will become the iron womb. But with this, they're able to artificially create people, gestate them. They're humans, but they're basically built, purpose-built. And over the generations, they would eventually make the phenotypes of enhanced humans for the mech warrior, the elemental warrior, and the aerospace pilot. So, very advanced technology and capabilities and understanding in the biology and medical side of things to do both animals and humans to that level where it's just normal, no big deal. With that is also now an ethical dilemma and a moral dilemma, right? The ability to artificially create people like this is definitely something that would provoke plenty of debate in this day and age. But we see with the clans, they're much more utilitarian and pragmatic in their approach to stuff like this. Why they do this? They did it originally because they needed the numbers. What the Star League in Exile is a very large group of people, all things considered, but for a multi-planet society, very small, right? And all the clans are their own little society, basically. So they need to have their numbers go up. And the old-fashioned way just isn't cutting it. It's not banned or barred or anything like that, but it's just not enough. So the needs of the clan or the clans dictated this iron womb technology being utilized to create people. They knew it could, they just haven't done it due to the ethics of it. But Kerensky is like, screw it. We're beyond ethics now. We need to survive. We need to ensure stability and safety. And thus, the True Burn program got its start, you could say, there. And there's a lot of stuff you could look into, like blood names and stuff that got to start with Kerensky and the clans, because, well, it's a clan thing. But all of this makes sense, given the circumstance and the situation, right? It's a very believable setup. There's no super huge leap of faith style things in terms of explaining the creation of the clans, in my opinion. And I think that's a job well done in having a cohesive and supportive backstory, right? A nice foundation to draw on, or creating a nice foundation for it to lean on. So, without getting too bogged down that much longer, what else can I really say here personally in terms of this kind of somewhat of an anthropological lens being looked into? Well, is that all of this happened in a vacuum. Well, the vacuum of space, but not just that, because they have planets. But the point is, they got to do all of this cultural progression, evolution, and change into the clans in a vacuum of cultural pressure. There was no cultural pressure to do this. There was the real pressure of surviving. And was Kerensky right or wrong is not really something to spend too much time on. But whatever your thoughts might be on that, he is the one that succeeded. The Pentagon worlds were brought to heel. The Civil War was ended. And the cultural change that resulted in the clans is what would flourish in this area. And this makes sense for why the clans have a lot of rites, rituals, and structure in regards to conflict, right? Part of their change in viewpoint and merit and ability is also something that you say bleeds into their view of conflict, which is why a lot of it's trial-based. So what we have is not wanting unnecessary loss of life, not wanting unnecessary damage to infrastructure, and quick, decisive engagements. The trials basically fit the bill right there. And they have a lot of different kind of rights that can be invoked and things that can be invoked during these trials, allowing the clans to be incredibly ruthless, but also utilitarian in their ruthlessness, right? We need to have this trial, but we're going to have it away from civilian zones and infrastructure, and this one battle will decide the outcome for this planet or this resource or whatever. It's a lot better than protracted combat for decades, potentially, right? But also quite different, quite harsh, quite alien, you could say, to a standard human way of thinking. But this all stemmed from the harshness that they survived, both in just getting to where they are, then and the Civil War, and the restructuring into the clans, which all makes sense given the conditions they survived, as well as the fact that they came from a military organization originally. So the clans being very militaristic just fits. And I don't have much else to say other than that. When you look at the different major things for the clans, I feel like they did a great job back in 1990, 1989, whatever, and fleshing it out from there. I'm not saying all this came just right then and there, but they did a great job, in my opinion, creating a faction that isn't alien, but also isn't just your standard human either, right? Because so typically in sci-fi stuff, especially, and fantasy, we have some type of other race, right? In the case of sci-fi, Xenos and stuff like that, to represent a particular radical concept of humanity, perhaps, in full-on detail, and that's it, or to represent some type of radical idea in general that really would not feel believable in the hands of humanity, maybe, right? Or just represent some type of bestial thing. Well, in the case of Battletech, it's all humans all the time, and the clans are a great way to introduce a human faction that is incredibly different from what you're accustomed to in that setting. Could they have just as easily, or perhaps even more easily, had the clans come in, they'd be They have their interesting tech and different looking mechs and whatnot, but culturally, all they are is the Innisphere with a different color scheme. Yeah, they could have done that, and it could have worked fine, but they went a much different route. And what we see, whether intentionally or not, is connections that you can make to the cultural evolution of the Star League and Exile into the clans. So, some of that, such as the complete restructuring into the clan structure and the removal of biases for the most part, orchestrated on purpose, and others just a natural organic progression from a military organization into this clan-based structure. The clans do have a criminal underbelly. It's not an official caste, but it's referred to as the dark caste. And these bandits and these criminals and these malcontents are a problem for the clans, but it's never really brought up in such a way that it's as big a problem as the criminal underbelly is for the Innisphere at large. This is partly because honor is a big deal to the clans. All the clans. And not just to their warriors. To their civilian population as well. They are instilled with the idea and they have the belief that if you say you're going to do something, you do it. Don't be deceitful. Those type of things. So, if you're living as a productive member of clan society, you are not going to hold your tongue if you see some dark caste shenanigans going on, and therefore you're going to have a pretty decent response to that stuff happening. So the dark caste has to be really, really kind of like in the shadows, in the distance type of deal. And I feel it's part of the reason why it's not as big of an issue for the clans and dealing with them, or the fact that they exist isn't as big of a dangerous problem as it is for the Inner Sphere and whole different sections of their territory. Anyways, I could go on and on, as you can see. So thanks so much for indulging me if you did. I definitely appreciate it. I'm not trying to say the clans are the bestest thing ever of all time in anything, but they are my favorite factional type of the Battletech universe. I'm not saying they're the bestest thing of the setting either, right? That's a very personal opinion. What you might like could be House Steiner, or Kurita, or the Northwind Highlanders, right? So I get all that. But what I am trying to say is this setting of Battletech overall is pretty lore dense, and I think has a very relatable, believable thing. Like point A to point B, getting there is a fairly straight shot. We don't have a lot of crazy twists and turns to take to make it work. So things that happen in the setting feel pretty believable, and I think that in part lends a certain weight to the setting and a certain enjoyment of the setting once you get into it. In any case, if you made it through the entirety of this, job well done. Let me know in the comments. Leave a like if you want to. Subscribe. That'd be great. I understand that everybody likes being told to subscribe. You're all smart people. You've been on YouTube before. You know how this works. But be that as it may, it's almost like an obligation. If you make a video, it'd be like, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But honestly, share your thoughts in the comment section on what you think I said here, or anything else you want to interject with. Totally curious. And if you feel like doing all the algorithm stuff, I'd appreciate it. If not now, maybe later. In any case, that's all I got for you. If you made it to the very end of this video and you're hearing me talk right now, definitely comment the word anthropology, just so I know you made it to the very end. I'm sure some anthropology, like diehard expert person-y who stumbles across this is going to go, this wasn't an anthropological lens at all. I was just making correlations, and I think it was, my video. Anyways, thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care.